Well, I came to the United States on my mother's birth date, also John Lennon's birth date, October 8th, and 1960. I was on the cusp of turning 10. I was born on March 27th, 1950. And I got here in 1960 with my mother and sister. My father had to stay behind because, as you can well imagine, a year after the revolution there was a great deal of activity at the consulate with Lebanese immigrants wanting to leave the country. So my father had to stay behind tending to visas and what have you. So I got here on the verge of being 10 years old. I remember going into 6th grade, hardly knowing the language and what I was reading. I don't have a recollection of ever being able to speak English, but to gradually pick it up as I went along, you know. We didn't have private tutors or anything like that. We couldn't afford them. But film and music have always been parallel avocations for me. I mean, I remember, you know, instances in my childhood in Havana where I was marked by either one, but not to the degree and significance that they took on after I left the country. I think as an adult I come to understand why. But the early memories that I have as a child, you know, is, for example, getting a nice 78 RPM of an Elvis Presley album or an Elvis Presley single, you know, under the Christmas tree. You know, what a neat surprise. You know, I love those colorful covers, you know, with Elvis and his pompadour in different, you know, sometimes he had black hair, as in Loving You, and in other times he had brown hair. You know, I could never tell, well, what was the real color of his hair, or they kept dyeing it. But, you know, I was a big Elvis fan as a 7, 8 years old, you know. And I remember seeing Jailhouse Rock as a kid in Havana. Then I remember seeing, when I came to South Florida, I remember seeing Loving You on Miami Beach in one of the theaters, you know, near or on Lincoln Road. I can't remember precisely. And then a few years later, I remember in Mexico City, because I lived my early teenage years in Mexico City. When my father finally left Cuba in 1961, he became a diplomat for the Lebanese government. And he was first stationed in Mexico City, and then in Beirut, where I graduated from high school at the American Community School in the middle of the Six-Day War. Okay, what happens is the worst thing that can happen to a kid is to have to pack up and go every few years. You know, it happened to me when I was 9 and I had to leave Cuba. Nobody who left around those years thought that they were leaving for keeps. They thought we'd be going for a few months, a couple of years at most, but nobody really thought that they were not coming back, you know. And it's sad that my parents never did, you know. I haven't gone back, but that's another drink of water altogether. The point I was making is, kids don't like to have their lives interrupted. It's not fair, because at that time you're making friends, you know, you're getting used to a place and a time and an environment. And whereas it's good to acquire a cosmopolitan view of the world, you make friends and you lose friends, and you're left in the lurch every so often. So my friends became the two constants that I had wherever I went, which was film and music. In Mexico City, I found out right away where you could buy the top 40 singles, and I'd go there with the money I had saved during the week,